So let's move on to part 2 of APUSH test strategies, where I will go over the LEQ. So do yourself a favor. In the description, there will be a link to a Google Doc with the LEQ strategies sheet. It has the examples that we will be going over in this video in case you want to read them yourself or even do the prompt yourself. So it's important to note that the LEQ is going to be around 50 or 55 minutes long. That is the amount of time you will have for this essay. Not a lot of time considering how much time you have for the multiple choice. Now, you will be given multiple choices for the LEQ, and you will have to delineate which choice will work better for you. Which topic do you understand more? Normally it will have the same historical thinking skill. The only difference will be the topic of the discussion and the time period of the discussion. So let's kick off with the first strategy. Think contextually. Now, what does think contextually mean? Well, think contextually means thinking about the prior or post events that happen after the topic of the event or the topic about which you are discussing or arguing. Okay? So say we have the prompt, right? Compare and contrast the impact of social, political, and economic developments in World War I and World War II. Okay? So you're going to ask yourself, when you think contextually, what is the significance of these events? What developments could have resulted in these events, and what are the consequences of such events? This will help you develop a strong contextualization, few sentences or paragraph, and this will give you the contextualization point. But you'll also need to remember that you need to connect between your contextualization and your thesis, and we will go over your thesis in a little bit. Okay, so here is my example for context for the prompt that I just read. After the meaningless tragedy of the First World War, the United States did not desire any involvement in European affairs or foreign conflict. This tendency was coined isolationist, and it ruled American foreign policy for over 2 decades before the nation finally entered World War II. Despite the efforts of such an ideology, World War II had a significant impact on American society. Now, you start off with your context, World War I and isolationist policies. That is our context. And we'll call that pre-context because that happens before the events of World War II, which is really what we're talking about. The time period is World War II. World War I is just what we're comparing it to. Now, when it says what the developments could have resulted in these events, right? We thought about that question. The development that resulted in these events was World War I and isolationism. What was the significance of these events? Well, it dominated American foreign policy for over 2 decades. And what are the consequences of such events? We haven't gotten there yet. That's normally post-context. But we have our pre-context and we have our significance. And we have connected it to World War II with our last 2 sentences. Like World War II finally entered World War II, and World War II had a significant impact on American society, which connects back to the prompt. Of course, you have your connection between the thesis and our context has to relate back to the prompt as well. Not only link them together, but link to the prompt too. So, good luck with that, and we will go over some examples, I believe, which we just did. Good job. Anyways, the next step, or strategy really, is brainstorm or conceptualize, which you should really do first, right? You should brainstorm what you want to do, and then think contextually. Again, not everything is in order, but don't worry about that. So, when you brainstorm or conceptualize, you should create a concept map. Why should you create a concept map? Well, because this is one of the most powerful tools that can help you determine what flow of evidence you might need to use in your LEQ. And I believe that that is one of the reasons why brainstorming is so important. And brainstorming and conceptualization can help you choose which prompt you might want to do for your LEQ and help you decide, oh, I know more about this one than I do this one. Don't just choose the one that looks easier. Choose the one that you know more about. Not the one that's easier to write, the one that you know more about, and the one that you can explain more about, the one you can get more into detail about. The next strategy is the perfect thesis. And I call it the perfect thesis because I believe it is in fact a perfect thesis. Why is it a perfect thesis? Well, because it is very strong, very good, and it is very powerful at attacking the claim and reciting the prompt and tackling the issues of the argument very well. So when you're creating your perfect thesis, or before you're creating your perfect thesis, you should ask yourself a few questions. What is the significance of these events? How can I prove my claim? What are my possible topics of discussion? These will become your prongs. And what is the argument I am trying to make? Alright, this requires you to understand what the prompt is asking you to do. So you have to understand what the prompt is asking, you have to understand the significance of the events that you are going to talk about, and you have to be able to create your prongs for discussion. Okay? And so the structure is a little like this. You have time period, and then you have event or events. Then you circle back to prompt. You cite your historical skill. So this is either going to be so your historical skill is either going to be change, CCOT, changes in continuities over time, so it's either going to be a change or a continuity, or it's going to be comparison contrast, which our practice one is, so it's going to be either a comparison or a contrast, and our CE, which is cause and effect, so it's going to be causation or effect. Those are your historical skills. You're going to say to your argument, then because your claim and then a semicolon, however, you're going to circle back to prompt again. And you're going to state your argument, your second argument, since your second claim. Oops, there's also between here, there is your second historical skill. It's going to look something like this. So this right here is your structure for the thesis. Alright? Now you don't need to memorize this from this video. It should be in the document in the description. So check that out. And so here is my example of a practice perfect thesis for the prompt that we were given. During the early 20th century, the two world wars both had a significant impact on the political, economic, and social developments of the United States because of the large-scale mobilization of the country for the war effort. However, America saw more consequential and powerful expansion of the economic and political spheres in World War II since it lasted longer and played a major role in combating the effects of the Great Depression. Now, we need to make sure that we prove this fact when we're talking about our differences. And we also need to prove our claim one, right? We need to prove our first claim and when we're discussing comparison, and we need to prove our second claim when we are discussing contrast. Alright? And so the next strategy is strongest evidence. It's kind of like perfect thesis, but it's strongest evidence in this case. So it's perfect evidence, but there's no such thing as perfect evidence. You can only have you can only have weak evidence, weakest evidence, strong evidence, stronger evidence, or strongest evidence. And you can have weaker evidence too, but we want to go for strongest evidence. Okay? How do we get our strongest evidence? Well, start by listing as much evidence for your claim, meaning those two claims that we came up with before, as you possibly can. Then choose the best two or three pieces of evidence for your body paragraph. So you're going to ask yourself a lot of questions when trying to come up with the strongest evidence. How can I find the strongest evidence is the best question you could possibly ask yourself. You need to think hard about that question. How can I find the strongest evidence? What do I need to do for that? What is the most significant event or development for this time period? How can I relate this back to the prompt? That's important. That'll help you in getting your analysis and reasoning skill. Is this event more impactful or important than others? Why does this event matter in regards to my argument? What is the historical context for this evidence? What prong of my thesis does this evidence support? These are good questions that you need to ask yourself every time you're looking at that list of evidence you come up with before. And so on the document in the description below, you will see my list of evidence and the ones that I chose specifically for my body paragraph that I wrote as well. And so, speaking of body paragraphs, we're going into body structure, which is our last strategy for the LEQ. Now, the body structure strategy also has a specific structure that you should always follow. Now, you can manipulate it a bit, change it up a little bit, but you should always follow something similar. So, when you're doing your body structure, you should ask yourself a couple questions. How should I structure my body paragraphs? Good question. How do I? Well, what is the best way to organize my information? What is easiest for me? That is a good question. What's easiest for me to understand and organize my information? For me, this structure, the one that I'm about to tell you, is the easiest way for me. How can I most efficiently argue my claims and defend my position? What should I do to achieve good analysis and reasoning? We all have a problem with getting that last analysis and reasoning point. However, I believe that if we work hard to get the significance as well as the goal of trying to get that analysis and reasoning point, and not just suddenly achieving it by sheer luck, and we actually attempt to gain that as a goal, and we try and figure out what exactly I need to do for such a goal, then I believe that that is the best possible way to achieve said goal. So, the structure is a little complicated. You can look at it in the document below, of course. Please use the document below. It will be very helpful. So the structure is you're going to start off with your claim and your historical skill. So which historical skill are you using for said paragraph? Or if you're using multiple, then you need to make sure you have 2 claims for your body paragraph. So if you do use say you have a comparison contrast essay like the one that we have right now, you would start off with your first claim, right? Your body paragraph claim number 1. Then you would list your evidence for said claim, and then you would do a second claim that also relates to the first claim, but also circles back to the claim in your thesis. And then you would list your evidence for said second claim, and then conclusion that relates both of the claims together in a final ending sentence that includes some contextualization for post-contextualization, of course. So, then you're going to do your evidence. And again, your evidence is going to be the strongest evidence. Alright? It's going to be the 2 or 3 pieces of evidence that you chose from that list. Then you're going to relate back to the prompt, because that's important. You need to make sure that your evidence and your claims relate back to the prompt. Then you're going to discuss the significance of the evidence. Okay? Then you're going to do analysis of the reasoning, and on the document you will see some other sample LEQs from College Board. Now, if you do 2 historical skills in one body paragraph, you will do your claim, okay, plus your historical skill. Okay, then you will do your evidence. Then you will do your significance. Of evidence. Right? Then you will relate back to the prompt. Okay, so the order changes because you have changed your paragraph. Okay, then you're going to transition, and then you're going to do your second claim plus your second historical skill. Okay, and then you're going to do your evidence again. Okay, then you're going to do significance of evidence. Then you're going to relate back to the prompt. And then finally, you're going to do your analysis. And reasoning. Okay? So this is the structure you would follow if you want to do a double chunk, we'll call historical skill paragraph. And so that's it for the 5 best APUSH test taking strategies for the LEQ, and I hope that your APUSH LEQ test taking experience goes well.